For 20 years now, I've been fighting to uncover who are these people who are pulling the strings of the EU decisions? How do they operate? And how are they linked to the EU's political elite? If you look at Plus Schumann, the epicenter of political power in Europe, you see the European Commission on the one side, next to the Council of the EU. And all around that square you find lobby offices, most of them belonging to big multinational corporations. And you find them also in all of the side streets, all over to the European Parliament and beyond. 2,500 lobby structures are based in Brussels. 15,000 lobbyists, the second biggest lobby industry in the world. Only Washington, D.C. is bigger. So, European Union legislation is complicated. It goes through a lot of stages. It always starts with the European Commission. They take new initiatives for legislation, for policies, and then it goes through the institutions, the parliaments, the Council of Ministers. And from the moment that the European Commission takes its very first steps in developing new legislation or new policies, industry wants to be there to influence it. The World Trade Organization was planned at a time when there was a wave of privatization around the world. And when there was this dominant thinking that what is good for large companies is good for everyone. Just give them free rein. In October 1997, I was on the train to Paris, on the way to a meeting that would bring together activists from across Europe and around the world to discuss a trade agreement that was negotiated behind closed doors at the OECD.
On debate was the Multilateral Agreement on Investments, the MAI, and this was about international investments. Sounds pretty harmless to outsiders probably, but in reality it boiled down to a massive attack.
The Multilateral Agreement on Investment was cooked up by some of the world's largest corporations and their associations. And the goal of it was to constrain governments from regulating these big corporations and from regulating capital and investments. It literally constrained governments. It put handcuffs on government regulation and then empowered the corporations with a whole new set of rights to be free from regulation, but also to sue our governments.
So this agreement would have meant that governments would have had to compensate foreign companies if they wanted to increase environmental protections, if they wanted better labor standards, if they wanted to secure equal treatment for women, or if they wanted to tax capital. The MAI would even have led to companies being compensated for expected profits that they might lose from some new law or regulation. And this goes completely against the logic even of the free market. Negotiations were top secret and behind closed doors, until the official proposal by the EU was leaked.
It was some Canadian groups that somehow obtained electronic copy of the text.
Well, clearly the original source was a democracy-loving civil servant in a government that shall not be mentioned. How it eventually got around is we scanned the text into a website and wrote a commentary on what it meant so that a layperson could actually understand it.
When all of this got public, it turned out that several of the European governments didn't even know about it. And then France put up her veto.
So business had been so successful in influencing the MAI rules that this time it was counterproductive.
So despite the defeat in the OECD with the MAI talks, Commissioner Liam Britton didn't want to give up this project. So he brought it in again under the name MIA and wanted to launch a similar investment treaty in the WTO talks.
La ringrazio, la parola al commissario Britton.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I think there is a wider degree of consensus on this issue than the protagonists would wish to admit. The fact of the matter is that most people, but not all who have spoken, do see the merits of an international agreement on investment, and they are right to do so. You cannot force investment to take place. You can do what you like. You can shout and you can scream slogans from the sky, but people will not invest unless they believe that there is a possibility to get a return.
So then at a point in time, European Trade Commissioner Sir Britton decided, I am going to invite for dinner 40 CEOs of the major services companies in Europe. Big banks, big telecom, big insurance, big distribution services, big transport services, big tourism companies. When you take all the different sectors, it is actually making about 70% of the GDP in Europe. So he invited a bunch of 40 of those. After the dinner, he said, well, now that you've got some food by the Commission, you owe me something. You have to do something for me.
People sometimes think that the Commission comes up with ideas out of the blue and then pushes them. It's not so at all. The Commission is thirsty for ideas from the economic actors to help us to decide what to put forward, which is in the interests of Europe.
The Commission has for a very, very long time taken as its starting point in trade negotiations the interests of large European companies. So, for example, when we would ask for access to Commission documents like correspondence and minutes from meetings to reconstruct what was going on with the whole trade debate, the Commission would treat these requests as if they were a hostile act. They would cross out all the essential elements, the things that they would not want us to know about, treating us as if we were an enemy. So Liam Britton never got to Seattle. The entire Commission had to resign because of the massive fraud several commissioners were involved in. And in Seattle, the Millennium Round itself took a completely unexpected turn. We were not alone anymore with our concerns.
More people! Nobody goes in, nobody goes out! Shut down WTO!
Think tanks are not themselves lobbyists, but they are part of the landscape of lobbying because companies use them to transmit their demands and their perspectives. And all of these are heavily dependent on industry funding.
Several people are sponsoring it. Microsoft is one of them. American business is present in Europe. Microsoft is one of them. Why not?
What also happens is setting up fake NGOs, as happened in the big battle about the software patents law. Suddenly there were these advertisements from an NGO that said it was representing small and medium-sized companies, but the financial backers of this NGO were Microsoft and SAP.
In the end, it's all about money.
It has to be made visible what the role is of lobbying in EU decision-making. What is the role of a large company like Monsanto or Shell? Or what's the role of a foreign government like the Chinese or the Russian in making decisions in Brussels?
When I started working as a Capitol Hill lobbyist in 2002, that was the time when the style of lobbying involved things like gift giving, campaign contributions, fundraising, hiring revolving door persons out of Congress with lucrative jobs. And I noticed I just wasn't able to get through to most people. I couldn't even get through to meet with many lawmakers unless I had something to give. So I started preparing legislation to reform the lobbying process. But As you can imagine, no one really was interested in my legislative proposal.
We had the desire to regulate lobbying for a long time, but in 2004 a new commission came in. We wrote an open letter to the commission president, to José Manuel Barroso.
E que vamos trabalhar, vamos dar o máximo para servir a Europa, para servir as instituições da União Europeia e para servir todos os nossos concidadãos. Não tenho...
The response was a very short formal letter, like saying, we have received your letter, thank you, very interesting, but no substantial response.
1 month after the financial crisis started, in October 2008, José Manuel Barroso appointed the independent high-level group on financial supervision. The group was to work out proposals for the regulation of the financial markets and to find a way out of the financial crisis. 8 so-called wise men were appointed to this group: Jacques de la Roche, Rainer Macera, Onno Ruding, Otmar Issing, Callum McCarthy, Leszek Balcerowicz, José Pérez Fernández, and Lars Nuber. We looked into the independence of this independent group, and we found some astonishing things. De la Roche is the co-chair of a financial lobby organization. Macera is linked to Lehman Brothers, Ruding to Citigroup, Issing to Goldman Sachs. McCarthy, Nuber and Balcerowicz are notorious deregulators. And Pérez Fernández works to provide financial market intelligence to big banks. 3 of the 8 were directly linked to American banks, all of which were directly involved in causing the crisis. Balcerowicz, in addition, is closely linked to American right-wing think tanks like the Cato Institute, which was one of the closest advisors to the Bush administration. He was also involved in neoliberal think tanks in Brussels, in Poland and the UK. Not a single of these wise men was in favor of strict regulation. Not a single one of them was really independent. And the effect of these 8 wise men on overcoming the financial crisis was 0. The main thing that happened was that a lot of public money was flowing to the banks. Merci.
This whole affair has a horrible sense of déjà vu. The same financial institutions that were bailed out with taxpayers' money are now making a fortune from Greece's misfortune, while those same taxpayers are paying the price in deep cuts to their salaries and social services.
Was it this what we Europeans had wanted?